I'm considering doing some gardening, but my get up and go I think might just have got up and gone. But I need to get on top of things because the ivy that I cleared from my cutting garden plot a few weeks ago is starting to grow back. Like doing the housework, I either save it up for a great big job or I do little and often. And while we're talking about the trials and tribulations of gardening, I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel. Whether you're a novice gardener like me, we can cheer each other on in the comments, or perhaps if you're a more experienced gardener and you're willing to share your expertise with me, or just have a little bit of a laugh at the rookie errors that I'm making. So I have got all my tools to hand, my gardening gloves, my fork for doing the weeding, and then my secateurs to really get on top of the ivy that's been growing everywhere. And before we get down to business, I have got a few changes in the garden to show you. Number one, I have got these highly scented in your face oriental lilies, which were a gift for some friends who came around the other weekend. I decided not to have them as a pot plant indoors, but to have them outside. And they've really brightened up this spot. Now, I'm just wondering whether I can save the lily bulbs and plant them out again next year, or is this a one-time only plant? I've also got a new basket for my weeds. Well, I thought if I was going to embrace gardening, I wanted it to look as pretty as possible. And actually this was free. And I got it through Facebook, not Facebook Marketplace, but one of the community groups in the town where I live. We have a sharing site where you can either ask for things or people put things up that they want to get rid of. So I was lucky enough to be the winner of this free log basket, and I'm going to use it to put all my compost clippings in rather than using this plastic bucket. One thing that I am going to have to keep an eye on is the native geranium. I've let it grow up into clumps, but the clumps are creeping towards each other, and I don't want too much ground cover at this stage because I don't want the fact that I've got my bindweed growing to be smothered. So I'm going to have to make a decision at some point as to how much coverage I'm going to allow it to make across my grounds. And I've previously mentioned that I was hoping it was going to be the geranium with the larger flower, and rather sadly it's the geranium with the very spidery look to it. And although the foliage might be good for flower arranging, I just find the flower is way too insignificant. So with that in mind, that it isn't the geranium variety I was hoping it was going to be, I think that one was probably around the edge of the border over there. I think I won't worry too much about it, and I will be a little more ruthless in my digging out. Do you see what I mean? It's just such an insignificant flower, so I'll give it a little bit of vase life for a while, and then the rest of it, well, a lot of it, is going to get the chop. My Verbena Bona, I always struggle with this, is it Buenos Aires? Is doing really well, as is my geum, and what was labelled as being a pink. So that all looks good, as does my hydrangea, and it's got a few new sprigs of growth coming up too. I am really tempted to cut a few of these stems so that I can dry them and enjoy them indoors, but from experience I just think it's going to be a little bit too early. Normally I don't cut hydrangea until mid-September, and then you know it's going to dry rather than flop. As you can see, my dahlias have lasted, so it's a week since I planted them out from their tubs, and I have been keeping them well watered. My husband still thinks I've got them in the wrong place, so I'm going to see how they get on, and then possibly I'm going to move them to where I left my I'm going to move them to where the oriental lilies were. I think, having looked at the sunshine, that is the bit of the garden that gets the sunshine for the longest period of time. This spot gets quite a lot of the evening sunshine, but it's not all day long, so we'll just have to see. But as I'm going to be a flower farmer, I need to crop my flowers. And in fact, if you watch on to the end of the video, I'm going to use one of the containers I recently found in the charity shop to make a beautiful arrangement. So do make sure you stick around to the end of the video. Now what I have forgotten to do is to bring out any water with me. So I'm going to take a slug of water from my bottle and then use this as a temporary vase. Right then, just remember where that lid landed and then come through and cut my flowers. Now in last week's video I was debating how I could get long stems from my dahlias because I had some side shoots on the side of them, and I was worried about sacrificing those and not having so many blooms to cut, you know, per plant. But what I will say is that the dahlias have lasted well in the vase, and what I've done is actually deadhead them in the vase. I did the same thing with my cosmos too. So although the main flower head goes over, there is a chance that the side shoots might open out. I suspect they're not going to fully develop, but there's a tiny little bit of life left. So my flower arrangement indoors has gone from a very full dahlia heavy arrangement to something that's more sleek and slimline, a little bit more petite in character. Now I'm wishing I brought my compost basket with me, because I'm going to hold on to these side shoots while I put them into water. I might just go and fetch it and be a clean gardener. So the question now is, how many dahlias do I cut? But I keep reminding myself I'm not growing these flowers to enjoy them in the garden, although I have been enjoying them, the view from the kitchen window. I'm growing them to crop them. So that is exactly what I'm going to do, and they're more useful to me as a crop if I can cut the flowers with as long a stem as possible. And this is where I'm slightly regretting not asking at the market stall I bought these flowers from how tall these were going to grow. I've inadvertently bought dwarf varieties, so it just means that every arrangement I make is going to be slightly smaller than I really wanted it to be. So I'm taking off the side shoots because I don't want those to get caught up inside my little temporary flower bucket here. And also you don't want any green leaves below the waterline when you actually come to arrange your flowers for real. So I've done sort of a half and half croppage. Perhaps I might take out another red and perhaps one of the pinks that's thinking of opening up. I still seem to have, if not plenty, a reasonable number of buds left. The pink seems to have the most buds on it. So there's my second dahlia crop. Love the way the pink, this one, matches the colour of my water bottle. But they're just temporarily in water because I am going to do a proper flower arrangement later on in the video. Right, let's have a look at those cosmos. I think some of them need deadheading. Making my way down the garden using my brick stepping stones. So yes, definitely some deadheading needed there. And then another crop of cosmos. So I'm cutting the stems long, and as I said, the same thing with the dahlias. I found that although I am sacrificing some of the buds by cutting the long stems, I can deadhead these in the vase, so I do get a bit more life out of my stem. Leaning over to the astrantia, I've got one stem left of that. That's probably a week or so old, and it's a little bit different in colour, more burgundy, the fresh growth. I've got a single marigold there. These are supposed to grow so plentifully, but I just seem to get one flower at a time, waiting for my zinnia to come into flower. So hopefully that might be ready to pick next week. And now I'm putting off the job of weeding out my bindweed, digging out some of my geraniums, and then the problem of my ivy that's growing over the lilac. Can you see me through it? So this is the problem I've got. We have this slanted lilac tree which has become overrun with ivy, which is really good as a nectar source, but it was making the tree very top heavy, and it's got this precarious angle to it. And to be honest, it's been like this for the whole 25 plus years that we've lived here. And I think possibly this trunk here, I think it may well have been a second lilac tree, but I think it is just now all ivy. So having tried to cut the ivy back, I can see lots of new growth, and it's that balancing act between wanting to keep some ivy or wanting to keep the lilac tree, because the lilac is so lovely at the big, in April, May, June time, but also to keep a degree of privacy between us and our neighbour. So it's almost like I want to stop the ground cover. I don't want it crawling all over the place, but I would almost want to sort of lift the crown of what's become an ivy tree, but it's also tangled. I'm not entirely sure I can do that. So I have option one is tackle the ground cover first, and then option two is to use my husband's rechargeable chainsaw and see whether I can lift the crown a little bit. So I'm totally inappropriately dressed for doing gardening on my hands and knees, but as I'm here and the mood has taken me, I'm just going to go for it. So tackling small bits at a time, just to try and stop this growth. It looks lovely and green and lush, but I know from experience, having cleared the first lot when I took over this part of the garden, that it is just going to become harder and harder if I don't tackle it sooner rather than later. So I think probably this is going to be my version of mowing the lawn, making sure that my ivy is under control and isn't going to distract me and suddenly look pretty one minute and then look like a jungle the next. And of course, if I'm cutting these roots here, eventually the crown of the ivy, the head of the tree, will all start turning brown. So it's going to look really ugly. And look, I keep finding cable ties everywhere. It's my husband's preferred fixing of choice, so I'm going to throw it over there and to pick it up and put it in the bin next time I'm passing. I can see some seedlings growing down here. Still looks like tomatoes to me, but I guess the tortoise was here and she was partial to a bit of tomato. And I'm working my way around this guard. I cannot get it out again. I think that was all part of tortoise proofing and fox proofing, and it's been buried so deeply that I can't get to it. But I'm hoping once my rose has grown up, it won't be quite so obvious what's going on. Oh look, I've got some deadly nightshade down here. Oh no, it's not deadly nightshade. It looks like it. The red berries, are they viburnum berries? Just gave me a shock there with the brown foliage. I thought that was something a little bit more dangerous. So a mix of clipping and pulling, just to show the ivy who is boss. I think this may take some time, but I guess, as I said at the beginning of the video, it's little and often, isn't it? I don't want to sort of think of gardening as being that, the cleaning of the house, the dreaded once a week. If I, like I do with the housework, 10 or 15 minutes a day, and then it doesn't become a huge chore. I should just be able to keep on top of it. And now having got myself under this tree, I now need to back out. What else can I cut? It's like a puzzle in here. Can't quite work out what belongs to what. I don't want to accidentally cut down some of the lilac, which I'm trying to encourage to become centre stage again. Well, I'm bored of that now, but look, I have got that much ivy that I have clipped back. I think it is going to be a case of little and often to break down the job. But next up is to tackle some of this, what's it called again? Geranium, the native geranium. So it's got little sort of runners underneath the surface of the soil. They do seem to come up quite easily. So I don't mind it as such. I just don't want a whole garden full of geranium. So if I can keep it in distinct patches, that works for me. And also I've got a few tufts of grass as well. It was the tortoise enclosure and I just covered the grass with mulch. I didn't dig it over or anything like that. What's that? Coffee bag. Hasn't rotted down. More coffee bag. Right, on to the next patch. Well, quite frankly, I'm bored of that now, so I'm going to reward myself by spending a moment arranging my flowers and basking in the fact that I'm starting to make a step towards becoming a flower farmer. Go me! So here I am doing the thing that I like doing best, although I think I've got to myself a little bit of a challenge here. So I picked up this glass dish from the charity shop a few weeks ago. It cost me £5. I was intrigued by the flower frog, but I'm equally intrigued as to how that's actually going to lock my flowers in place. I got visions that the flowers are going to stick out and then they're going to fall out because they're going to be top heavy. So the first job is to fill my vase. Probably make more sense if I took that out. Fill my container with water. And then have a look at my flowers. So my dahlias have got all quite short stems, but I'm just wondering whether I shouldn't be so worried about the stem as to whether the stem length, as to whether the thickness of the stem is going to preclude it from actually fitting through these holes. And I don't want an arrangement where it's all sticking up like this. I want it to have a natural arch. So that is how we would conventionally arrange flowers, with a focal area, and it looks as if everything is radiating out from the centre. A more modern way of doing it, or perhaps a less skillful way of doing it, would just be to poke your flowers through the holes and just see where they land. So I think this is going to be slightly problematic. So if I cut my short stems even shorter, I will get to the thinner part of the flower stem. Like that, and then they will start to bend towards the outer edge, and keeping a few leaves on means that the leaves will start to diffuse the look, or fill up the opened mouth of the container. So rather than a highly considered arrangement, I'm pretty much doing a cut and plonk where I see a gap in the flower frog. I'm going to slide something into it, and what I will make sure I do is just to vary the height of my flowers. So this one is slightly taller than that one that's nestled down below. So I'm going to get my largest flowers in first. So I might even, I need to cut off some length because the stem is too chunky. Yes, that will hold. So it does sit proud a little bit. I might cut it slightly shorter so that the leaf is just sort of hovering above the flower frog, and just sort of, I don't want it being too leggy because I haven't got very many other flowers to put in. My red dahlias have got a much narrower stem, so they will slide in. I want to make sure the heads go in different directions so it doesn't look too static, letting them spill out. And this kind of container probably lends itself to a dahlia. The problem with dahlias is they have this funny placement of the flower head. It actually looks better sort of standing up like a soldier. It's not like a gerbera where you'd expect to have the flower stem like a T shape in relation to the stem. This one, it does seem to be standing out quite well in relation to the vase. They are rolling around a bit, but I have got a little bit of control. What I might do, it's quite difficult when you're arranging flowers in uneven numbers. Normally you try and get a sort of pattern of triangles going to guide you, but that's not going to happen. But what I am going to do is to cut my largest flower slightly shorter and put that in the middle. Is it going to stand up? Not quite sure. And then have a slightly smaller flower sort of rolling out towards the edge of the vase, like that. And then start to fill in. So it is an arrangement of odds and ends, so we just have to work with it. So the astrantia's got quite a curve to it, so that would be quite handy because I can have that softening the edges of the container and just sort of spilling out. I quite like it when the flowers break the edge of the container, when they sort of hover between the surface and the higher flower. It's almost like they've got their necks resting on the edge of the glass vase. And then, you know, it's an arrangement of single flowers here. I've got my calendula, my marigold on this side. Could take away some of the leaves. Wouldn't it be wonderful if I had loads and loads of marigolds, and then I could just have a whole vase sort of heaped up with marigolds? That would be rather lovely, but everything is a bit sparse in the garden at the moment. But I am going to make use of these cosmos. So I can see where I've deadheaded before. I'm left with a stalk with no flower head. And then I'm going to be quite clever and cut my flower down like that. So I've got some bits of green and some bits of flower head. So I've got two white dahlias there. I'm going to put the whites sort of on the other side to sort of balance out. And then I can use this bit of foliage just to add a little bit of natural greenery underneath. And then do the same with my pink cosmos. So I'm cutting very carefully because I've then got two little buds of cosmos there, so I can get double use out of it. Everything has got to earn its place in this arrangement. So, seeing how securely I can fit that into the container. I think I'm going to have to get rid of one of those side shoots. I can't get it to slide through the hole. It's too bulky. The two side shoots. No, I got it there. So it's one side shoot. And I've got this tiny little bit left. Well, I've grown it. I want to use it. I'm just going to hook it right over the edge. So I had imagined that my flower stems might be tumbling out, but they do seem, I've cut them reasonably short, they do seem to be holding fast. Now here, this one bloom is much taller than the rest, so I might cut that off as an individual flower. And then find a hole. This is the problem, finding an unused hole or one of the holes in the flower frog where it's only got a skinny flower in it, and then I can use these bushier bits just to come upright in the centre. There aren't enough holes where I want them. I think possibly I might have, there's a spare hole there. I'm going to put it in that hole, then sort of bend it, not bend it backwards, but let it lean backwards so it starts to fill out the centre of the arrangement a little more. So yes, I'm being hampered by the number of holes in my flower frog. So let's see, I'm going to put a single flower in that spare hole there, and then another bit of greenery is going to share a hole with that astrantia. And then I've just got a few stems that need to find their way into the compost heap. So there is my finished arrangement. Very casually done, just poking the stem where I could find a hole, but quite nice to make use of one of my thrifted containers rather than just clogging up my flower arranging cupboard. Just gonna clip that bit of the stem out there just to neaten things off without cutting the flower. Oh, I've got another bit of green here. Over this side, I think. There. So thank you so much for joining me in today's gardening episode, and I've managed to arrange another vase of flowers using flowers that I've grown myself. So I think that's a win, and all I've got to do now is put my gardening tools away and take my log basket full of compost over to the compost heap. That's all from me for now, and I'll see you again next time.